The NBA offseason has been crazy, with many teams making significant moves like the Lakers, Celtics, and Suns to improve their respective rosters. But apart from the big teams, I think the low-key moves that the Toronto Raptors made this offseason will help them bounce back and perhaps even contend for a playoff spot in the East next season. Along with their young core of OG Anunobe, Scotty Barnes, and Pascal Siacom, they retained Jakob Poeltel on a 4-year deal and signed the recently crowned FIBA World Cup MVP, Dennis Schroeder. On paper, this bunch of guys playing together looks scary on the defensive end with its incredible length and versatility. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into this projected starting lineup and analyze why this 5-man lineup is going to be a defensive nightmare in the upcoming season. Now, before we break down each of their defensive capabilities, let's have a brief look back at how they performed last season from the defensive standpoint. Under Nick Nurse, the 2022-23 Raptors were a handful to deal with on the defensive end, as they ranked 12th overall in terms of defensive rating, and they were also ranked first in steals, limiting their opponents' points off turnovers and second chance points, and opponents' turnover percentage. Now, obviously, their overall size and versatility have played a huge role in their defensive dominance, not only last season, but in the seasons prior as well. See, being one of the premier defensive ball clubs year after year in the NBA is not just merely a coincidence or a stroke of luck, because the way the Raptors have been constructing their roster in the last few years has always been built by design. After seeing the length of Team USA, which featured Andre Iguodala, Kevin Durant, and Rudy Gay, Raptors GM Masai Ujiri had since then been on the lookout for acquiring long, versatile defenders over smaller players. The driving reason behind this philosophy was that even though they are not yet adept at scoring, which we all know can be easily developed later on, Ujiri believed there's no way you can teach size, length, and strength. If you take a quick look at their roster, you'll notice an emerging pattern in his player preference. He loves guys that stand somewhere around 6'7" to 6'9", with at least a 7-foot wingspan. And you can also notice that these guys are good to above average defenders at best, which is why opposing teams are going to have a hard time finding a mismatch in their defensive schemes because they're virtually all the same in terms of size and length. Now that we know the reason why the Raptors have so many lengthy and versatile players, let's switch gears and talk about how their projected starting lineup will cause havoc on the defensive end next season. First up, let's talk about OG Anunobe. Standing at 6'6" with a 7'2" wingspan, Anunobe is undoubtedly the Raptors' best perimeter on-ball defender. Anunobe finished last season first in steals with almost 2 steals per game, ranked third in deflections, and he also got his first major award by being part of the all-defensive second team. In addition, he also logged an average of 107 defensive rating in his first 3 years, with a career high of 104.4 defensive rating during the 2019-20 season, and ranked 7th overall in defensive win shares in the same season. Anunobe is the perfect archetype of the modern-day wing defender. Aside from his physical tools, he's got cat-quick anticipation. He's got that proverbial nose for the ball, and he knows how to manipulate his man into making tough shots. Here's OG going up one-on-one against one of the best ISO players in the game, Damian Lillard. Look at how Anunobe keeps in step with Lillard by lowering his defensive stance. And after Anunobe cuts his driving lane, Lillard has no choice but to go for a tough step back, which Anunobe easily blocks because of his superb reaction and length. And in this other ISO sequence, check out his stance once again as he leveled with Reggie Jackson while locking him up without fouling as the shot clock expires. Anunobe is one of the best defenders in the league in one-on-one coverages, as he only allows 0.85 points per 1.6 possessions, which is good enough to rank above the 70th percentile. And if you sum up his total contribution to team defense using the Raptor rating, Anunobe has a plus 2.2 defensive Raptor rating, which is considered above average by league standards. For comparison's sake, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson Jr., has a plus 2.6 defensive rating. So we can pretty much say that Anunobe is trending at an elite level in terms of playing defense. Anyways, next up, let's talk about Pascal Siakam. Siakam is one of those long and lengthy experimental projects Ujiri had that has flourished into becoming a legit all-star. In his first 4 seasons in the league, you can see that he was clearly focused on the defensive side of the ball by registering as high as 104 points in terms of defensive rating, before he carried the offensive load for the Raptors and eventually transitioned into a two-way star, which he is now today. But despite the added responsibility on his shoulders, Siakam is still a pretty good defender like he once was, especially on the post and surprisingly in one-on-one situations. Advanced stats shows that Siakam ranks at the 85th percentile when it comes to post defense and 52nd percentile in ISO situations with 0.93 points allowed per 1.2 possessions. Here's Siakam's defensive prowess working on full display. After the Raptors blitzed Beal off the screen, Siakam was forced to help on Harrell on the roll. Now, after successfully stopping his momentum, he still had the presence of mind to turn around and block Hachimura, who came from the baseline. And even against much stronger and bigger players, Siakam can still hold his own. Adebayo was supposed to take a jump shot from the elbow, but he was clearly bothered by Siakam's long reach. Bam then tried to attack the lane, and again, Siakam was there to cut him off. With the shot clock winding down, Bam had nowhere to go, and he just took a tough turnaround, which he missed. Now, apart from Siakam, Scotty Barnes is also another versatile big who will play a huge role defensively in their starting lineup. Barnes fills in the shoes of a 6'8" forward who carries a 7'2" wingspan. Now, even though he's not a good post defender like Siakam, he compensates for it by being a solid rollman defender, averaging 1.25 points allowed on 71.4 percentile and a decent defender in ISO situations. Aside from these defensive areas, Barnes is also a tremendous help defender, and he's also quite good at recovering in ball screen actions and pick and rolls. The Raptors called ice in this defensive coverage, and Barnes lured Middleton to go into the strong side help. However, Achiuwa was a bit slow in rotating, which is why Middleton got a clear path to the basket. Fortunately though, Barnes quickly notices the lapse and recovers just in time to save the possession. Beal was supposed to use the pick to get to the middle of this action. However, Barnes' size and length prevented him from doing that as he fought over the screen. With Siakam on the drop coverage and Barnes hounding him on his hip, Beal was then forced to take a low percentage mid-range jumper with Barnes contesting hard. Anyways, to complete the front court of this lineup, the towering 7'1" Jakob Poltel will lock in the center spot and man the middle. Despite getting only traded in the midseason, Poltel is already quite familiar with the way things are running up north, as he played for the Raptors from 2016 and 2018 under Ujiri's watch. Now, the only difference though is that this latest version of Jakob Poltel is much stronger and lethal, as he averaged 13.1 points a ball game in 26 games while grabbing 9.1 rebounds. Aside from his scoring improvement, his defense also improved a lot, as he ended the season with a career high of 1.2 steals and outing while averaging 1.3 blocks per game. Historically, Poltel has been a consistent shot blocker, as he ranked in the top 20 in blocks for 5 consecutive years, and he's also been making a name for himself as a solid glass eater as of late by ranking once again in the top 20 of the rebounding department for the last 2 seasons. Even though he plays like a traditional big, Poltel is incredibly agile for his frame, and surprisingly has quick feet in catching up whenever he gets blown by. Here's Wagner at the top, defended by Poltel. Now, despite the quick burst of speed that Wagner unleashed here, Poltel was able to latch onto him step by step, and he even showed his athleticism with a volleyball spike to deny Wagner at the rim. And even if the Raptors lost Beal in this dribble handoff, Poltel still managed to close the gap and prevented an easy 2. Based on the plays you saw earlier, regardless of whether the attack comes from the paint or a long shot from the perimeter, it's going to be really hard for the opposition to break down the defense if you have Anunobe, Siakam, Barnes, and Poltel playing as a unit due to their insane length and defensive switchability. According to advanced stats, this 4-man lineup averaged a solid 109.2 defensive rating in 20 games for the Raptors last season. And with this said, we have now some sort of an idea of what this lineup is truly capable of on the defensive side of the ball. Now, to round up this starting five, let's analyze what Dennis Schroeder can bring to the table defensively. Even though he's not as tall as the previous four guys, Schroeder has a 6'7" wingspan, which is kinda long given that he's only 6'1". And despite being not known as a great defensive player, Schroeder showed his potential that he can be one with the way he defended Serbia's superstar Bogdan Bogdanovic in the recently held FIBA World Cup. Look at how Schroeder stays attached to Bogdanovic throughout this play. First, he fights over the ball screen, then he prevents an easy two by denying an entry pass on the down screen. After another cross switch, he persistently fights over another screen before forcing Bogdanovic to take a contested step-back three. Now, another reason why Schroeder is such an underrated defender is because he can read defensive schemes on the fly. See, noticing that Serbia is going to run a double drag screen, Schroeder goes under the first screen and then goes over the second so he can stay in front of Bogdanovic as he turns the corner. Schroeder eventually beats him in position, slaps the ball out of his hands, which leads to a turnover. This starting lineup of Schroeder, Anunobe, Barnes, Siacom, and Poltel looks indeed downright scary from top to bottom on the defensive end. But aside from these guys, the Raptors also have great depth at the bench to sub in for them, with the same length, size, and defensive skill sets like Chris Boucher, Precious Achiuwa, and Christian Koloko. Versatility is the name of the game in today's NBA, especially on the defensive end. And what's scary about this Raptors team is that they have a ton of it. Almost every player on their roster right now can play from 2 to 3 positions at least. And what's even scarier than this is that most of them are still young, with plenty of years left ahead of them to grow, improve, and expand their game even further. So, what do you guys think about this lengthy Raptors squad? And do you think that they'll make a splash in the East next season? Be sure to let me know your thoughts on this by putting your comments below.